Welcome to Perspective and Potential, where we explore fresh ways to view the world around us and unlock the powerful potential within each of us. I'm Abigail Strait, along with my co-host and mother, Gwen Fun, and we're here to explore with you in each episode through ideas, stories, and strategies that can help you grow, shift your perspective, and step into a fuller version of yourself. So whether you're looking to make a big change or just curious about small steps you can take today, we're here to inspire, encourage, and help you along the way. If you want to learn more about who we are, we have an introductory bio on our webpage. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in and see where a new perspective might take you. In today's episode, we're tackling a big question. Are others truly giving offense, or are we choosing to take it? We're going to explore how our perceptions, reactions, and mindset play a role in navigating potentially offensive situations, and how shifting our perspective can lead to greater peace and understanding. So let's dive in and discover how we can reclaim our power by choosing how we respond. So, last time, Mom, we talked about the amygdala, or that guard dog. What's going on, and what are we feeling really?
Well, when the amygdala starts barking at us, we really are truly feeling something, not just an emotion, but we're actually having physical responses. And so there are like more than 200 feelings. And some of those feelings are what we call primary feelings, and others are secondary feelings. Anger really is a secondary feeling.
Okay, so what do you mean primary versus secondary? Because as you're talking, I'm just thinking, man, that really made me angry. And that's not a primary feeling, you're telling me.
No, that isn't a primary feeling. So uh, anger is just a defensive feeling. So the most common primary feelings that we instantly turn into anger are fear, hurt, feeling insecure or rejected. We feel threatened. We feel inadequate. We feel found out or helpless, vulnerable, maybe guilty or embarrassed. And So we did list a resource on our website with a list of like over 200 feelings there. But most people can't identify more than just a few of those feelings. Little children, if you've been around them, they mostly group all their feelings into happy, mad, or sad. And as we get older, we do learn to identify more feelings, but unless we dig deep, into ourselves and identify exactly what feeling is triggering us, well, then we're more likely to revert to anger instead of reaction, um, anger as a reaction instead of forming a real power retaining response.
So it's interesting because you talk about little kids only identifying a few emotions. In education, and when I was a principal for an elementary school, I noticed a pattern that students started to really feel their feelings, or big feelings, or sometimes when we were starting to identify whether or not there were some behavioral or learning concerns, is usually around the age that they are in when they're in first grade. So around 6 or 7 years old. And um, when we identify it, it's usually because the student is becoming frustrated, right? Off of something triggers them in the classroom, and they can have very big outbursts. Sometimes those outbursts are vocal. Sometimes they will just scream at the top of their lungs. Other times it might be a physical outburst and they're flipping over the desk. Um, and so when we would work with these students, as we started to identify that they were really just communicating through their behavior, right?
Mhm.
And we would pull them out into, a group of just a few students, and we would use a curriculum that helped them understand their emotions and their feelings and how they could regulate those emotions or feelings. Now, here's the funniest thing. This was usually over the course of about 9 weeks to complete this program. And I saw incredible things happen. I saw first graders in 9 weeks be able to go up to their teacher and say, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling, we would identify it with colors. I'm feeling red. I need to go outside. And they would remove themselves and go outside. And then when they were feeling ready to rejoin the class, they would be able to do that on their own. And I started to notice these 5 and 6 and 7 year olds are becoming better at identifying not only their emotions, but the emotions of others around them better than some of the adults in my building.
It's not surprising. Kids are quick. Um, and if we really haven't been encouraged, I think, to look beyond happy, sad, and mad, right? Um, then, we don't. But I love this quote by the Q School. It says, when you're offended, take a look at the tender space the words and actions are touching. Your
Mm.
triggers are about you, your trauma, your lived experience, insecurities, and unmet needs. It's often less about the other person's behavior or the stimulus, whatever it is, and more about your body's response to that behavior.
Well, that reminds me what we talked about last time, in that our universe is us. And I think that also includes, like you're talking about, our history. That's part of our universe, but it's something that is unique to each of us. And so as we form these memories, those, I think what you're saying is those are often the triggers.
Mhm.
And so eh, why do we have such strong feelings and physical responses when we are offended?
Well, so for this, I think we need to look at some research by a lady named Candace Pert. And she was studying actually cells and how they were encoded and what the chemicals that are in our brain, how they encode upon our cells. And here's a very interesting thing that she found. Dr. Pert's research provides scientific evidence that a biochemical basis for awareness and consciousness exists, that the mind and the body are indeed one, and that our emotions and feelings are the bridge that link the two. The chemicals that are running our body and our brain are the same chemicals that are involved in emotion. And that says to me that we better pay more attention to our emotions with respect to our health. So when we have an experience as a child, and in therapy, I mean, it's kind of like a standing joke, right? That you have to go back to your childhood. The truth is that as we grow and develop, we are having very biological imprints made on ourselves, and these imprints then become our triggers.
Hmm. It's interesting because as you're talking about that, I'm having a memory come to my mind of when I wasn't necessarily offended, but I had very, very unintentionally given, or I had said something and the other person involved took offense to it. And really I was, at work, um, and I saw a person that I recognized, and I just made a comment that I perceived as a friendly, jokey comment. And the response at the time from that person was a smile and a laugh, and we both kind of went on our way. And it wasn't until a couple of days later, uh, they approached me again and said, "Can I please speak to you?" And when we had stepped into a room, they shared with me how upsetting my comment was to them. And I mean, this caught me completely off guard. But I'll never forget the comment that she said to me, and that was, I've been a doormat my whole life, and I'm not going to be that anymore. I'm going to stand up for myself. And that was even more surprising to me because never was there any thought in my mind that the comment was anything more than a way to connect with somebody that I recognized in passing. Um, and so it, you're talking about that there must have been a history there that I just was completely unaware of. And but yet, whatever I had said, she immediately made that connection.
Right. So a lot of times we do take offense when no offense is intended. Um, when we take offense, it's always personal.
Hmm.
So even if people are trying to offend it, we don't have to take offense. It really is a choice. We can consider the source, or we can assume maybe they're having a bad day, or we can, respond in such a way as to find out if they really do intend to offend us. Then we can take our own personal actions there.
I think that's a hard thing sometimes for us to. I think that offense feeling can be so instant, and maybe we don't even label it as offense. But how do we then choose not to be offended?
Okay, well, we have to go back to that reframing thing. Of course, some kind of stimulus, and we're stimulated. Um, and then our amygdala is going to start shouting at us. And if we keep saying, like last time we talked about, you take that moment to formulate a response. Sometimes these offenses, especially if they're intended, can be so dramatic that that we shake in our shoes, or we're just so angry we can't hardly stand still. um, but those are the times when we're really just regulated, and that we can't contain ourselves. We need to, instead of taking a moment, we need to take a break.
Hmm.
We need to actually end the conversation, or maybe we need to just share with the person, okay, I'm feeling really upset right now. I mean, that's honesty, right? And it's
Right.
all about you, it's not about them. I'm really upset right now, so I need some time to kind of work through this. And then there's this guy named Paul Gilbert who he has a Compassionate Mind website, and he shares a template for us to go through. And I think we're going to put that on our website. But it kind of looks like this, and it's where we can actually list what we're feeling, and maybe why some historical things that have happened to us in the past, and where that connection is. And then we can work through the whole thing as far as how we react when we have that, and then we go down here to the consequences of that reaction. And so that is one really good resource that people can use when they walk away from a really disturbing, offensive situation. I often use this other really simple one where I ask a client to draw a stick figure that represents themselves, with a bunch of those empty thought bubbles all around the little stick figure. Then I
Okay.
have them fill in the bubbles with their internal feelings about themselves when this particular thing happened, what somebody said or what somebody did, and what the message they received from that was. And then we work at correcting or eliminating all those negative thoughts into positive ones.
Okay.
And as a,
So let me just, so as we're sitting there, so you've got a stick figure in the middle of a paper, and
yep,
then you draw these thought bubbles all around them.
right.
And so the internal feelings about themselves, like what's an example of an internal feeling about yourself?
Okay, so like let's say this person is feeling rejected.
Okay.
Whatever the stimulus was, it made them feel as that they were being rejected. So then they might have internal feelings of, well, I'm just not good enough, or I'm just not smart enough, or I never do anything right, or nobody ever really wants to be my friend. I mean, there could be like just a myriad of different thoughts that are going on inside this person's head. And so then we literally have to take all those thoughts and tear
Hmm.
them apart and look at them and say, have you never really had a friend? Oh, well, I had a friend in third grade. Oh, so that's not really true then, right? Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to dismantle all these negative thoughts and try to turn them into positive ones. Like, because until we have a positive self image and a clear view of who we are or who we're trying to become, we are more likely to react when stimulated rather than give a power retaining response. But we need to do our own work. Each one of us have strengths and weaknesses that need to be identified so that we can either shore up our weaknesses and utilize our strengths.
So I think one of the things that keeps coming to my mind as you're talking about this and doing the work is it's like if you happened upon a house that needs to be renovated really before it can be truly lived in or realize its full potential, and some of those things that have impacted the house may be a result of neglect. Maybe some of our own um, feelings or triggers are because we have never really done the work, like you've said. But they also could be external factors, right? Like there are very real things that sometimes of out of our own power or control, we've been impacted, and we have now some lasting memories that cause us to be triggered. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to us being willing to do the work ourselves.
Right. I've dealt with a lot of trauma kids who actually did come up in abusive situations. They've had a lot of trauma in their life that they had absolutely no power to stop or, to make different. Um, and so they start to get these unhealthy reactions to life. They see the world as their enemy a lot of times, and so they're survivors, and they fight and fight and fight to survive. But the thing is that a lot of times they want the world to change to meet their needs, and I think we all do this a little bit. But the thing they have to learn, the thing we all have to learn, is that we are the only thing that we can change is us.
Hmm.
And that we need to change ourselves to be able to maneuver in the environment in which we find ourselves, the
That's,
world around us.
that's such a good point. I have two boys, and they're teenagers currently. They're very close in age. They are only 15 months apart. So they're at a time in their life right now where um, they're starting to become really come into their personalities, and while I love both of them equally, and I can see the potential in this one, I can see the potential in that one, I do have to recognize that they are very different. They think very differently. Their love languages are very different.
Mhm.
The way that they communicate is very different. And they're starting to realize, I think, some of those differences as older teenagers now, and how their relationship will work moving forward. And I did have a conversation with one of them very recently about, he was actually trying to seek, how do I have a better relationship with my brother? And I said, one of the things that I've observed is that you communicate and have relationships with other people, and one of the ways that you communicate is through joking and through jests. Something as little as just putting an empty pop can in, his backpack when he's not looking, right? It seems just like a funny joke to him. It's nothing major, but that may very well be perceived by your brother like you're picking on him. And I don't, and it's not, that's not how it's being intended, but that could be how it's being taken. And so, he, I thought very wisely and maturely said, "You're right. You're right." And he then now I think is giving the power back to himself on how he is going to choose to communicate with his brother, not because he was ever meaning to be malicious or to hurt his feelings, but he's aware now of what might set off his brother, and he's choosing to engage with him differently so that the outcome is a better relationship.
Yeah, and that's really wonderful in a parent-child kind of a scenario there that you could take to be the bridge between those. A lot of times as adults, though, we don't have that bridge, right?
Right.
And so we have these misunderstandings, if you will. People say something, they don't intend it to be offensive, but it touches a tender spot inside of us. And so we um, we really do have an option there at that second corner of the reframing to maybe ask a question to clarify, right?
Hmm.
Um, okay, be vulnerable enough to say, okay, I'm feeling a little offended here in the sense that it hurts my feelings. Is that what you intended? I mean, you have every right to give that person the opportunity to clarify what their intention was. Maybe at this point you're going to have a different response there. I mean, you're going to have a different consequence because the person will back up and say, "Oh, no, 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 I didn't intend it that way. I'm so sorry." Or maybe they'll say, "Well, yeah, that's exactly what I mean." Either way, you still have a choice to be made whether you're going to allow that offense to cause you to react or whether you're still going to respond and either take a time out and say, well, okay, I need to end this conversation or I need to remove myself from this environment and and then I need to start, figuring out um, why this is affecting me. It's always, it's always good to clarify, right?
Yep.
And to give people the opportunity to, you know,
Well, and I think what you're saying too is even with their explanation and you being vulnerable and willing to share, hey, this is what happened as a result of that comment or that action,
yeah.
and they can choose to confirm or clarify what their intent was. But even if their intent was to poke, to you know give offense, to drive their frustration home, I think another thing to keep in mind is what they say doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
That's true. And even if it is true, what they're trying to say, because, a lot of times people twist truths to suit their own needs, right? Um, Even if it is true, then we still need to go home and do the work on that. We need to figure out, okay, you know, if is this true and what can I do to change it? Maybe somebody, okay, let's just say you always talk too much, maybe you go home and you look at that and you go, oh, maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe I need to be more mindful to listen more and talk less. I mean, it's all self-improvement, right?
Well, and I
Uh,
think that's what you're talking about, right? Retraining the wiring in our brain.
Right. Before we go on to that, I want to make sure that we realize this is thousands of year old stuff because Epictetus has said that any person who's capable of angering you becomes your master. He can anger you only when you permit yourself to be disturbed by him. So even if they're making a negative comment, and and we do go home and do the work and find out that maybe there was some truth to that, we experience growth.
Mm.
And so it shouldn't be disturbing that, we have an opportunity to actually grow and change things
I
that,
love that. You said it shouldn't be disturbing that we have an opportunity to grow.
but it is, and it's hard. I don't want to make this seem like it's an actually just a breezy, easy thing to do. It
No.
does take work, and but it's worth it in the end if we'll take the time and commit ourselves to doing the work to to overcome this reaction, these angers that we hold inside us, and learn to respond.
Yeah.
So, um, so when we're talking about using Paul Gilbert's model, um, I think it's interesting and vital that we understand what Candace Pert was trying to tell us is that there is actually a biological reason that we have the physical and emotional reactions that we do, that there's actual chemical encoding on each of our cells throughout our body. And all the experiences that we collect over a lifetime, they're all in there. There's a lady named Carol K. Truman who wrote a book called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And I've actually seen proof of that as I worked with people doing EMDR. Um, now, EMDR is a therapy where you kind of get people in a really relaxed state, and then you help them evolve back through memories, and hopefully some traumatic memories that you can reprocess. That's the whole point of doing this, is to take those memories that you felt as a 5-year old when you were being bullied at school, that are just huge and enormous, right? And being able to throw those kind of out on the table and look at them as an adult, and be able to do things like consider that bully kid, what his life was like, or why he was a bully, and that it really wasn't about you, it was more about him. um, so the interesting thing that I found as I was working with people was that we would take them back, and the first question we asked them was like, "What are you feeling?" And they would give us all different answers: scared, angry. I mean, they give us all these different answers, and we'd say, "Well, like, where are you feeling that?"
Mm.
And it was so interesting. Like sometimes it would be like in their neck and their jaw, and what did you want to do? I wanted to scream at them, but they couldn't. Maybe they were a little kid and they really wanted to scream and yell, but for whatever reason they weren't able. Sometimes the stress and the tension would be in their hands and their arms. And their hands will be all clenched, and you go, "Oh, well, what did you want to do?" "Well, I wanted to hit that guy, or I wanted to push him away, or, you know, and then sometimes those feelings that they would have would actually be in their legs and their feet. Like they wanted to actually get up and run away, but for
Right.
whatever reason, they were restrained or unable to do those things. That just goes to Candace Pert's research that our cells are totally biochemically encoded
Hmm.
with with all these memories. They're linked.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that as you, like you were talking, as you sort through those emotions, those feelings, the triggers, all the things surrounding it, how then does it help us reframe or retrain our brain to respond to future similar stimuli?
Well, when we can understand, like, like being yelled at as a child, and maybe a parent or a guardian or a teacher, called us stupid or dumb or whatever. And that puts this encoding in our brain that we are that kind of person, right? But when we can look at that as an adult, and when we can start to put the pieces together, it's called reprocessing, right? We
Mhm.
start to put the pieces together that, um, no, we did really well on this and we did really well on that. And we can start to reparent ourselves basically and say, that person was just mean. They treated everybody like that. It wasn't about me, it was about them. And we can reprocess all of those feelings, and then it helps us to regain a feeling of power over that
Yeah.
particular concept.
Yep. Absolutely. That power I think is key. We talked about that last time, and there's the Henry James quote.
Oh, I love that one. Kindness is in our power when fondness is not.
And I just think that that is worth repeating again. Kindness is in our power when fondness is not. And I think that's so, so huge. We talk about boundaries, right? You talked about maybe giving yourself some space between a person or a situation where you need to give yourself a division. And that's because maybe you're not fond of the situation or the person or whatever, but we do always have the ability to be kind.
Well, a response of kindness always beats a reaction of anger.
Yeah.
Always, hands down, right? You can be kind even if people are not being kind, and you don't have to retaliate. Robert Brault, who's another writer, he says, I'm far surer of what is kind than I am of what is true. I think this particular quote is really appropriate with considering the political stream that we have going, and the election. A lot of people get angry, but we can treat everyone with politeness, even those who are rude to us, not because they're nice, but because we are. We can choose to be a good and kind and loving person. There's absolutely no law against that. And I think all these quotes are good advice because they teach us to be in control of our stress levels and our emotional energy. When our actions are in harmony with our desired persona, hopefully to be a kind person, we are less stressed and we feel better about ourselves.
So, if you've been listening today and trying to understand, what do I take away from this, the offense given or taken? I think there's a few crucial points from this conversation that we'd love for you to consider and how it applies to all of our lives. And that's first that we need to understand our emotions, right? And then how susceptible we are to taking offense. And like you said, that involves being vulnerable and willing to really take a look um, at ourselves, at our history, what is physically going on in our body, and all of that takes some time. But it also takes being honest with ourselves.
Absolutely. And being vulnerable enough to seek out intent. Don't just take offense. I think it's valid to ask that question.
Yeah.
I'm really hurt by what you just said. Is that what you intended? You know,
Yep.
and again, that's not about the other person. That's strictly your own feelings, right? I'm feeling really hurt by what you just said. Is that what you intended?
And I think that goes along with the last takeaway is choosing a kind response. Choosing a kind response. I really want to make sure that to be clear, we're not saying that you have to be sugary and flowery and complimentary. A kind response can be seeking clarification rather than an angry reaction.
Absolutely. And not because they're kind, but because you are.
Exactly. In our next episode, we're going to explore stress and how it affects our ability to respond rather than react. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And also, please engage with us by sharing your thoughts or requests for a topic on our website or through social media, and help spread the conversation about perspective and potential. Your insights make our dialogue richer. We're Gwen and Abby, and you've been listening to Perspective and Potential. Until next time, keep exploring new perspectives, and remember that every small change can lead to something big. Food for thought. Bon appetit.